Well, welcome into House of Champions. The World Cup is right around the corner. We cannot wait for Qatar 2022. The US just dropped their roster. I've got my good friend Michael Lahoud with me to discuss what have been maybe the negative reactions and where the positives are about Gregg Berhalter's squad. Let's just remind you, they're in Group B up against Wales, England, and Iran. But I guess first and foremost, I'd want to get your reaction from the initial squad being dropped, Michael, because I get the feeling you're not too happy with the squad.
No, I lost sleep over it, and I've lost sleep about a bunch of things in the football world. This was the one thing I was hoping to give me hope ahead of the World Cup. On House of Champions, I've been the biggest advocate for the USMNT. Now I'm having second thoughts.
Why though? Why are you having second thoughts about the squad? Because initially when the squad was dropped, there's always going to be disappointment from Gregg Berhalter's choices. And he's got a lot of players to choose from now. Not a lot of experience in that group, I might add. But why exactly are you disappointed? What got you so upset?
First and foremost, I don't know which standard these players are being held to. I feel like there's a double standard that's being applied. Some players are being told they're not in the squad because of form. Then other players who haven't played any minutes for their team are in there because of not form. So I don't really understand that standpoint. You have players who aren't fully fit. I think of Luca De La Torre, not 100% fit, but he's going to the World Cup. But I have to start up top. I was thinking about this, and getting some sleep clears your mind, but it doesn't clear my mind in terms of this. No Pepe, no PFUC, potentially no party for this U.S. men's national team World Cup campaign. That's going to be a t-shirt on House of Champions. I'm getting it made as we speak. I do like the inclusion of Haji Wright getting goals in Turkey. What that tells me is he's getting those goals, and overnight, a player who hasn't been that big of a factor in qualifying campaign because of what he's done lately, because of form, is now being catapulted into the roster and into this World Cup push. When you look at PFUC, he hasn't scored since, I think, September 18th or late September, but he's still part of a Bundesliga team that's pushing for a title. That experience, that big game experience, has to count for something. In U.S. men's national team rosters of old, and Gregg Berhalter rosters of old, he's come out and said he really places a weight on players playing in Europe. Now there's a bit of a double standard in that I don't understand. If you look at midfield, my second grievance, this one I got less sleep on than the first one, is what is the standard with Christian Roldan? Roldan's been injured for much of the second half of the season. Jordan Morris goes in, and you can argue for Morris, his pace. For Seattle that we see in Major League Soccer, his pace that he's shown in some of the Gold Cup games and qualifying, Jordan Morris he scored what? 1 goal, 2 goals in the entire second half of the season. He was a mainstay for the Sounders in the first half. So yet again, 2 players, one through health and just getting back to injury, form has not been there. And you leave out the likes, if you're going to pick anyone in Major League Soccer, Jordi Mihalovic, who had another cracker of a season with Montreal, left out. That is massive for lack of creativity in midfield.
Yeah, it's a great point. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of Gregg Berhalter. And I know it's a difficult job for any national team boss to leave players out. I was a little bit surprised. Obviously, James Sands, I have a personal connection to him. I was a bit surprised about him being left out. I was a bit surprised with Malik Tillman being left out as well. Recently doing very well with Glasgow Rangers, even though I think for both of those players, I think that the form from Rangers really hurt them in the Champions League and domestically. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't help when you're not playing well. Your team's not winning games. So I can understand. Let's talk about the inclusions more than the disappointments for a quick moment here. I'm very happy personally to see Joe Scally in the squad. He's been playing every single game for Borussia Mönchengladbach. Inconsistent as far as results have been. His performances have been incredibly consistent. So very impressed to see him in the squad. But also Tim Ream. What's your thoughts on Tim Ream? I mean, he hasn't played for a year. There's been all this dispute about him and Gregg Berhalter. There's a battle going on away from the scenes. And now all of a sudden, he's in the squad. I mean, I was just trying to wrap my head around that one. What's your thoughts on that?
I think he probably had a one-on-one conversation with Anthony Robinson, their teammates. Robinson having his best season to date for Fulham. Take away that penalty kick he gave up, but I think he's gotten better since being part of this U.S. men's national team fold, and it shows in his Premier League performances for Fulham. And that partnership between Ream and Robinson, you need more cohesiveness in this back line. If there's one weakness for the USMNT, it's in the back line. Partnerships need to be established. And I just wonder if Gregg Berhalter, twofold, that chemistry between Ream and Robinson, but also Ream brings leadership. He's a captain for a Premier League side. No one else in this roster can boast that. Experience is everything when you get to an international tournament.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the way he's performed, the way Fulham have performed has been fantastic to watch. And I also think that leadership quality from Tim Ream. You know, when you have a player who's playing well in the biggest and best league in the world, you cannot not take him. So to give him an opportunity to perform at this stage, I think is so important for the squad, so important for the young players in the squad who are looking to obviously learn from this experience in 22 and also develop for 26. So I think that's a great addition from Gregg Berhalter. So big pat on the back for me as well to include him. However, the biggest omission as far as I am concerned has been in the goalkeeper selection. Just a reminder, Matt Turner, Ethan Horvath, and Sean Johnson. Happy for Sean. Absolutely happy for him that he's been included. I'm sure you are too. But no Zach Steffen as the goalkeeper here. I mean, this is a really interesting decision and certainly a controversial one.
I back this decision. This was actually one of the things that helped me finally get to bed at night because I was worried whether he was going to bring Steffen or not. Goalkeeping position is one of the most important positions in U.S. soccer. It's shown in tournament to tournament. Go back to 2002, Brad Friedel. The last time we really saw a goalkeeper battle of significance going into a World Cup, Friedel, Casey Keller. Bruce Arena did a good job of deciding, okay, Brad Friedel would be my number one, Casey Keller would be my number two. In 06, there was a contentious battle that went down to almost the first group stage match, and it showed on the field. There's clarity that's been established by not bringing Zach Steffen. I think Gregg Berhalter realizes, okay, after that Japan game, Matt Turner, that was the game where he grabbed the number one spot by the scruff of the neck. He's my number one goalkeeper. You need a backup goalkeeper who's going to be a team player, who's going to be supportive of your number one. I'm not sure if Zach Steffen is in that mental frame to be that team player. I think he probably would have been salty, maybe sulking, and that has a massive negative impact in your culture, in your locker room, if you're going to try and get out of your group for the USMNT. So I think in the end, smart decision, probably the best decision from Berhalter. Zach Steffen has had a torrid year and a half. Prior to that, he looked very good. Yes, he was on the bench for Manchester City, but it all started going wrong in cup matches for him. Started woeful for Middlesbrough, has leveled out a bit in some of his performances, but I think he just needs some time off away from the national team. Maybe with the Gold Cup coming around, he can reestablish himself again.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it that there's something else going on behind the scenes with Zach Steffen, and form, absolutely. And being criticized as a human being is also very difficult to deal with when you're playing at the highest level, and that's what he was doing. Playing for Manchester City, playing for the US national team, you are going to be scrutinized for every single mistake that you make as a goalkeeper. And I feel like there's something else going on behind Zach Steffen right now. And no matter what it is, I obviously support him 100%. I want to see him do well, but I hope he's okay as well, especially with now the news is out that he's no longer involved going for World Cup 2022. So really interesting to see the goalkeeper selection, but I will say this, I'm so happy for Sean Johnson working so closely with New York City Football Club, and Sean as a human being, what he's doing off the field as well as on the field. Sensational inclusion. Let's finish on a positive here, Mike, before we get out of here. There was a lot of quality players involved in this squad here. Where are you really happy? What excites you most about the squad that tells you the US can get out of the group and do some damage potentially in the knockout stages?
Yeah, and I love this positive note because I've been waiting to exhale the negativity, breathe in the good. And it's in the core of this team. U.S. youth players. I love that we're now having a system that's rewarding the development of young players. Ian, you were part of the youth development system, youth national team captain, if I remember correctly, all the way up through the Olympic team. And this is what the U.S. needs to focus on if they're going to compete with the best around the world. The best teams, the best countries, they invest in youth. So many of these players coming through the youth system. I go back to 2015. I think that's where the inception point for this core group was built. You have the likes of Akel Acosta being part of a group, Weston McKennie, 2017, Christian Pulisic, and now Gio Reyna rounding out things. This is a group that Gregg Berhalter has established from the start of qualifying, and that consistency, these players, no surprises there. I love that. Those are going to be where you're going to get a lot of fruit, not just in Qatar, but also in 2026. I think that is something he has in mind, U.S. Soccer has in mind. And one of those players, I said it in Breakout Stars, Giovanni Reyna, getting fit, getting back in form, at the right time. I expect him to have a big say if the U.S. men's national team are going to get out of the group in the World Cup campaign.
Listen, there's a lot of noise and negativity around the US Soccer Federation. And it's not just the men's game, it's also the women's game, it's also the youth games. Everybody has an opinion right now. I'm very happy with the squad. I am very happy with the way that Gregg Berhalter put together a squad, as you mentioned, a mix of youth, a little bit of experience in there. Not so much necessarily World Cup experience because of the big gap that we've gone through. But I think this is a squad that can do some damage, that won't feel as much pressure. They seem to have great chemistry, which is so important. When you come to see team selection, who's on the plane, who's in the locker room, who's getting you out there on the pitch ready to go, those players who are on the bench who can't get into the starting 11, it's important to have that chemistry in the locker room, making sure you're pushing players. If you look at World Cups in the past, the way the US soccer team has done well, it's because of the players who were squad players trying to get in, pushing those players to give every single last ounce of energy and everything they've got for their country, for their nation, and trying to get victories. That's what it's about for US soccer and Gregg Berhalter. One game at a time, trying to get victories, putting points on the board, especially in that first game against Wales. But we cannot wait for that first kick. We cannot wait to see how well the US national team does. I'm happy, and I know and I can understand that certain people out there are not happy with the squad. But there's no doubt about it that Gregg Berhalter has gone with quality, he's gone with chemistry, and he is going for violence when it comes to Qatar 2022. Michael Lahoud, thank you so much. As always, brother.
Thank you for having me. And go USA. Cannot wait to give our Brits the smoke on House of Champions.